Hi, it's Dr. Denise at Microdose U, another episode of microdosing and women's health, wellness. So I have two related questions that I want to address, and then I'm going to add a little strategy at the end. So one of the things I wanted to clarify, when we talk at Microdose U, I mentioned several times about field data versus research. What I'm talking about, think of it as like if you're out in the world, right? So that's what we mean by field data, anecdotal, self reports. And we don't just take those lightly, those are consistent. Um, Tens of thousands of people that are reporting what their experience is. Now, I will always say that, the research in labs or controlled research is way behind what we know from people, reporting what their experience is. And also keep in mind that while um, there's trends, right? So we know microdosing tends to be a certain, like with psilocybin, start off at a certain dose, kind of just start this way. Generally, most people are going to have some positive experience. And yet, there's variation. In fact, variation even for me. One day, 100 milligrams of psilocybin might be perfect. Another day, I might, same exact medicine, feel like I need a little bit more or even a little bit less. And even with the LSD, now I've gotten some questions about the LSD. So LSD is very similar to psilocybin. You just need a very tiny speck of a dose. And I always caution people, Dr. Dave does the same thing. Please do not just go try that on your own. Find just whoever, somewhere that, you can get LSD and start playing around with it, because it is such a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of a dose. And the other thing is that you really want to get it from a vetted source. So somebody that we know, and just reach out to us here at Microdose U. That's why we have vetted sources, for that reason, specifically with the LSD. A lot of you, will sometimes even some people are growing their own psilocybin. So, of course, be very careful about the laws and all that near you. So, but psilocybin, very different. So again, back to the field data, it's like what's happening in the field, what's happening in the world. And when we have tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of people saying the same thing, that's worth paying attention to. And even places like Harvard, and which, decades and decades and decades ago, had real problems with the psychedelics, have now even embraced. There's just so much success that this whole idea that, psychedelics are dangerous or they're addictive in the hippy dippy time or something, there's just no truth to that. And it's an extremely safe medicine, both, all the psychedelics basically, but here we're talking about LSD and psilocybin. They're extremely safe and not addictive, and they absolutely have medical value. So they are incorrectly classified in terms of when we talk about classes of drugs and, safety and legality and all of that. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about that. So that's why I'm glad that you're here, so that we can give you the correct information. And remember that your response to the medicine, while there were trends, I always say this, your experience, your response to microdosing, LSD or psilocybin, is going to be the highest weighted factor in what determines your path. So that's why we always say, reach out to us, because everybody is so very different. So, and your experience is going to, if somebody, say, microdoses 200 milligrams of psilocybin and they're like, I don't feel anything, I don't know, it's always working, but I want to feel it a little bit more. That's going to weigh very heavy in terms of what you're going to do next time. So if you say to me, hey, Dr. Denise, I did one spray, which is 10 micrograms of LSD, and that was good, then that's what you continue to do. You're not going to build up tolerance, by the way, to these medicines at such low doses. You might have a short-term kind of tolerance if you were dosing every day, especially with the LSD. But not so much. You're not going to build up a tolerance. You get to your right dose, and that's it. I mean, when I first started microdosing, just the psilocybin, I was on the same dose for a year, twice a week, same exact medicine, same exact dose, and it was perfect. It absolutely was, so life changing, so perfect. It's one of the reasons I do these podcasts now, because that's the help that I wish I got. Particularly with physiological changes, hormonal changes. I wish that I had known what I know now, say 10, 15 years ago. So that's why I want to, if I help one person that has an easier time of it, that's why I do this. So the LSD, if somebody does 2 sprays, that's why we say, please reach out to us, because 2 sprays would be 20 micrograms. I mean, we're talking very small specks. That's going to be a very big difference for most people than 1 spray. So it's really important, particularly with the LSD, to be really knowing what you're doing. So right to the questions, I had 2 questions there. I'm going to actually answer them kind of together. And they were both asking for me to clarify what I mean by cyclical microdosing versus microdosing during perimenopause and menopause. So what I'm distinguishing here is the one question came from Carla. How do I cyclical dose? What do you mean by that? Please go back and watch previous episodes where I talk about a lot of this. What we're looking at is that this is for the menstrual cycle. So, way before menopause, perimenopause, when things start to shift. So during kind of normal menstrual cycles. And yes, I know that not every younger woman, is going to have regular cycles. And so that's another issue that I'll address. But let's just sort of say and in fact, psychedelics sometimes help normalize cycles for menstruating women. So Carla asked about, to clarify that. So what I mean by cyclical dosing, dosing by your cycle, is during that time before the menstrual time, what a lot of women call the PMS, even if you don't have symptoms, but that before premenstrual time, with premenstrual syndrome, if there's issue. During that time, a lot of women will sometimes notice some sensitivity, leading up to the menstrual part of the cycle. Maybe feeling like sensitive, or, kind of like everything's kind of bothering me physically, sound is bothering me, that kind of time. That is a time when psilocybin, it's best to kind of either skip a couple of days if you're feeling that way, or lower the dose. And yet, if you're also microdosing LSD, that's a time to actually take some of the LSD, use your microdose of LSD during that time. In fact, if you've seen the previous episodes, I've talked about the study that's going to specifically look at that, because they are finding that while there's a lot that psilocybin and LSD, properties they share, LSD has this extra part of the chemical structure that works on kind of focus a little bit more. It's good for brain fog, settling when we're feeling maybe a little sensitive, like during that, PMS time. So that's, again, lowering or skipping psilocybin during that PMS time, and actually dosing the LSD, microdosing the LSD during that time. So that was Carla's point and question. Now, Maria wrote in similar question. Well, there's a lot that got described, but basically what it boils down to is, what do you mean by the difference in, the menstrual cycle versus when you're in perimenopause as far as cyclical dosing? So here's the thing. Perimenopause and menopause, you're not going to cyclical dose because the cycle has now started to be irregular. Hormones, estrogen's dropping. And so now what you want is you want to sort of more regularly dose. Not that you have to keep a rigid schedule, but you're not going to skip weeks at a time necessarily. Again, your particular experience and response is what's going to determine. So there's people that we work with here at Microdose U where it doesn't actually line up that way. But again, the general trend, if you're just kind of want to, I want to clarify for Maria, what I mean by that is when you're feeling sensitive, et cetera, maybe that's a day you don't use psilocybin. And you might use the LSD, but you're not going to skip 2 weeks because your cycle is not regular. So instead, what your body's looking for is something to regulate because the estrogen has reduced or is irregular and eventually is so low. The psilocybin and LSD will help the body regulate. So it kind of takes the place of that cycle. The psilocybin will help specifically in the serotonin, which the estrogen-serotonin connection is what's going on there. The LSD is going to help with that sort of focus. A lot of women talk about irregular sleep, brain fog during perimenopause and menopause. So while psilocybin helps during that time as well, what they're finding is the LSD is even addressing that brain fog because of that extra pathway in the brain that is not addressed as much with the psilocybin. So what does that mean, Maria, for the perimenopause, menopausal kind of dosing? It means if on it's almost like intuitive. On a particular day, if you're like, oh, I just feel like my body feels kind of heavy and my brain feels a little more brain fog, that's a good day to skip the psilocybin. You don't have to skip weeks. You can just skip that day. If you feel different the next day, go right ahead and dose your regular dose of psilocybin. But on that day, if there's that kind of the brain fog and feeling kind of that you're skipping the psilocybin, that's a day, if you happen to be microdosing LSD, that's a good day to do a little bit. It actually will help. So that's generally, hopefully that straightens out the difference of what I mean. So basically, menstrual cycle, as Carla was saying, that's where you're going to really follow that 28-day cycle. And perimenopause, menopause, you're not going to follow that 28-day cycle because that's changed. So hopefully that clears things up. I always say, check the show notes, reach out to us, join Patreon. We have live meetings once a week, basically. And then there's the chat that's going on all the time that you can ask us some questions in there. And we have lots of people that are joining that are part of that really are a very good resource. And always reach out to me. If you want to ask me a specific question, I can answer it. People have reached out to me and asked me not to address it in the show notes, in the episodes. So I won't necessarily do that. So, we do change names and stories a little bit just because, people need to feel safe and confidential, questions and answers needs to happen. So, certainly I can answer questions directly with you. And if you really want to get, dial it in even more specifically and get some help, please reach out to us for some of the coaching will, really, I've worked with some people now where they've done like one meeting and it clarified all their questions. So, we're here for you. Let us know whatever you need. Always reach out to us. So check the show notes for all that information. Okay, so before I finish up here, I wanted to share with you a quick strategy. Now, I do this and recommend you do this whether you're dosing or not. And this is going to help regardless of if it's menstrual cycle time or perimenopause, menopause. A lot of the strategies are just great strategies. But we often talk about not just taking your medicine and going about your business to set intention. So here's a really great intention for healing and wellness, whether you're dosing or not. And here's what I say every day. I'm grateful for this medicine and it's healing for my highest best self, physically and psychologically. So some version of that. Grateful for the medicine, and it's healing for my highest best self, physically and psychologically. Make it your own. If the word psychologically, you don't want that, you want emotional, whatever you want to, change it up there. And you can add, if you're feeling, let's say, a lot of anxiety, you would not say, and I don't want to feel anxiety, right? Because the brain doesn't know not. If I say, don't picture a pink elephant, you're going to picture a pink elephant. So instead, you want to say the desired outcome. So if you have anxiety, the desired outcome, seeing yourself in the future as calm, and see that now. That's not like, oh, someday I want to be that way. In terms of your intention, of course, someday you want to be that way. The intention, though, is seeing that now. Say, I am calm. So, for example, if I wanted to add the anxiety piece, address that. I'm grateful for this medicine and its healing for my highest best self, physically and psychologically. I am calm and I will remain calm. So that's the whole intention. So saying that many times a day is extremely helpful. So hopefully that helps. Certainly keep the questions and the comments coming, and we'll see you next time.